Well, hi guys. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Matt. I am the IT director at an answering service in Shreveport, Louisiana called King's Telemessaging. I'm a past SNUG president. I actually just last year finished my 5-year stint on the SNUG board. What I want to talk to you today, though, is a product called QuaSAR. Basically, when we talk about call scores, we're talking about how well an agent performs to the specifications that we have on how they take calls. A good example of call scoring would be the ATSI Award of Excellence program. Now, ATSI is really great with that, but one of the things that we ran into is that it's not a year-round thing. So our agents would kind of know when it was ATSI season and they would do pretty well, and then once ATSI was over, they would kind of taper off. We'd hear some of those pleases and thank yous fall by the wayside. To combat that, some people also participate in CAMEX, and so between the two of them, you get pretty much year-round. But even when you do that, some of your agents just aren't getting calls. As an example, Trevor was one of the best agents we ever had. He was here for years. He was our trainer. He was a supervisor for a while. And in all the time he was with us, he never got an ATSI test call. He actually really wanted one, and they just, you know, ACD never handed him one. On the flip side of that, last year, Nick was our newest agent, fresh out of training, wasn't even in all the split groups yet. He got 3 of our ATSI test calls. So while that stuff is great for spot checking, it's not always the best representation of how each individual in the organization is doing, and it's not always a great overall picture of how you're doing as a whole. So from a spot checking standpoint, some of that, it's great, but we felt like we needed a little something more in-depth through an in-house monitoring program. So the problems with that is it can be really time-consuming. I mean, if you've got about 20 agents and you want to do 3 calls a week, well, scoring a 2-minute call can easily be a 10-minute process. You end up looking at probably 10 hours a week or so just listening to and scoring these calls. So if we're going to invest that kind of time, we want to make sure that we're getting the best results from it that we can. And we tried a few different things. You know, we started off with just paper forms. You know, you fill out by hand how they did on the call, you know, check boxes, that kind of thing. At the end of the day, you got a stack of paper. It's, you know, not terribly useful for really seeing what's going on. If you've got a really bad one, you can stick that in their file or sit down with them, but ultimately you're not getting any kind of big picture data from that. So the next thing we tried was like Excel spreadsheets, and I know a lot of people have done this with their call monitoring in the past, but really it ended up just being a digital version of the same problem. We've got a lot of Excel spreadsheets around that have scores in them. The Excel guru can sit down now and then and bring them all in together and crunch the numbers and give you some neat stuff, but at the same time it's still a really involved process, and data was still just kind of floating out there. Some of it's on the manager's computer, some of it's on, you know, my computer. There's a couple on the supervisor's computer. You try to put them on the network, and not everybody's comfortable with that. And at the end of the day, it just didn't work real well for us. So I actually started developing a centralized database with a web interface. And I got about halfway done with it and realized that it could be something that would ultimately be pretty useful to other agencies as well. So that was really how QuaSAR got started. Now, a QuaSAR is actually a quasi-stellar radio source. It's a big thing out in space. They look like this. Wikipedia says they're very energetic and distant, active galactic nuclei. That's not what we're talking about today, but hopefully that picture makes the logo make a little more sense. In this sense, QuaSAR is the Quality Assurance Archive. We officially opened it to the public in January last year, 2012, and I gave a little talk in Albuquerque. Since then, it's actually taken off pretty well. And last I checked, users had scored almost 18,000 calls. So, you know, it's really been put through the paces. A lot of people are finding it pretty useful. When we actually want to sit down and score a call, we'd use whatever voice logger, whether that's the soft switch, or if you've got one of the Wygant loggers, or whatever you're using. It's completely platform agnostic, so whether you've got, the older StarTel digital switch or the new soft switch, or even if you're on a different platform or planning to move to a different platform or planning to come to StarTel or whatever you want to do, you can continue to use QuAsAr, and all your data is stored there. So as you switch platforms, if you're on the 5700 now and you're planning on going to a soft switch, this stuff won't go away. One thing that we've had a lot, there's people that are currently doing something similar to this on their wagons, but they haven't always had luck having the soft switch to play well with the wagon, and the soft switch has a built-in logger. So rather than lose all that information, they go ahead and start using QuAsAr, and then that way when they switch over, they still have everything that they've scored in QuAsAr. Everything that you score in QuAsAr is available in that database pretty much indefinitely. So if you need to review stuff from last year, if you need to pull up stuff from 2 years ago, however long you've been scoring in QuAsAr, that data will be there. And a lot of people have found that useful in situations where they needed to let an agent go. You've actually got documentation here of, here's our criteria that we expect our agents to fulfill, here's how they scored on it. As you can see, there's a deficiency there. So just kind of in closing, the main thing that I want to mention is that with QuAsAr, you put in the time, you score the calls, and with this, in return, there's a little something for everybody. You've got really detailed reports for the agents and supervisors about specific calls and about specific strengths and weaknesses. You've also got tools for managers to identify trends or problems or issues. And then stuff like the dashboard or like the average by month, really big picture overview stuff that's great for owners that just want to keep a pulse on what's happening and how the company's doing. So I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Matt.